Hey guys, Aquatic Bob's here. So I was thinking earlier today what it was like when I first set up my first saltwater tank. And I could barely even see through the glass because the water was so cloudy and murky. And I think I was just using some cheaper freshwater lights that were above the tank. It didn't even reach from one side to the other, so I kind of had to do like a little hack job setup just to hold it up on both ends so it wouldn't fall into the tank. And in fact, if you bumped it, it actually was at risk of falling in because it wasn't even secure. But I was just so excited to have a new saltwater tank. So as time went on and I started to do some research, I started to learn more about saltwater reef tanks and about coral and fish. And at first I really wasn't even too big into coral, believe it or not. I just wanted some cool, colorful fish that had a lot of personality. And so I threw a few fish in the tank after it was cycled. I was so excited, and all of a sudden my wife says, well, aren't you going to get some coral? Now at this point of the journey, I was already pushing the limits with my wife. I was already kind of stretching the boundaries of what was acceptable financially because I'd spent so much money on the tank and the lights at this point. And when she asked me if I wanted to add a coral inside, I was like just swelling up like, it's really happening. It's happening. And so we wound up going, I think it was that day, to World of Fish. We went there, picked out a really cheap coral, just one, and it was a Duncan coral. And in a Duncan coral, it's a really common, easy to keep one. It grows like a little trunk, and then the top has like the head that comes out, and it gets kind of fleshy. Well, I didn't really know what a Duncan coral was, and the people that sold it to me at the store didn't even know what it was because it was kind of just a little hollowed out stump. It actually didn't even have much substance to it, but the trunk of it was still like a bright green. And so I brought it home, we threw it in the tank, and we just admired it. We turned the lights on all blue, still didn't even know what we were doing that much. And there's this Duncan coral that's almost dead. Like it was literally hollowed out, almost dead. And we were just in love with it. As time went on, we started to add more and more coral to the tank. Got some more fish, upgraded the lights so that they were actually lights that were capable of growing coral healthily. And I think what we had was the Chinese black box VPAR Spectras, which is also what we're using up at my dad's house in the 300-gallon build that we just did. We're also using T5s, Blue Plus bulbs with T5 fixtures up there too. But at this time I just had these VPAR Spectras, and I had two of them, and it was a 55-gallon aquarium, and I had one on each side. And we mostly had green coral in the tank because it had such a vibrant pop to it. And I just remember every coral that we even had a little anemone in there, a carpet anemone or maxi mini. And everything in there, when the lights would go blue in the evening, I would just fall in love with the tank each night over and over again. So there is a purpose to this story. Like, I've been showing maybe a few pictures of what my tank looks like now, some video clips and whatever. But the point is from the very beginning, I had such a heart, such a passion for this hobby. I just absolutely admired and adored the coral like it was something from a foreign planet that nobody on earth has ever seen before. And that's the way I treated it because I cared about it so much. And as time went on, I did more and more research. I've learned more and more. I still do hours of research a week, and I look up what different types of coral can go next to other types of coral, what different types of coral need for different light settings and different flow settings. How big do certain corals get before they just don't get any bigger anymore? What different types of corals turn into different colors depending on water conditions and nutrients, nitrates, phosphates. alkalinity swings. What do these things do to coral? What does it do to fish? And the more that I do research, the more I am reminded of that original heart when I first got into the hobby. That passion that just says, this is something that is so worth it. It's so cool that I don't ever want to quit. I want to just keep growing. I remember one year my mom got me a shirt for Christmas that said, just one more tank. And it had a picture of a guy with like 7 tanks on the shirt. And he's got his hand up like one more, and he's bringing in another tank, and he's just excited to get one more tank. And for a while that was me. I had several tanks all around my living room. I had tanks in the basement. Most of them were a little bit smaller, but it was like just one more tank, because the more tanks I had, the more versatility I had to grow different corals at different heights and in the tank, different rock structures. I loved aquascaping, loved setting up a tank, loved adding new equipment and trying to figure it out. That's another thing, is researching the equipment. As you can see from my tank here, I have corals all over the place. Now 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, over the last 5 weeks, I've slowly been bringing corals from this tank up to my dad's house. In fact, I think I've probably brought about 20 to 25 corals up there now to the new aquarium that we've built. And you can see it's still pretty packed in here. But I love this tank. I'm looking at, even as I'm filming some of this side video here, I'm looking at some of these acropora and the colors that they're starting to get now that I've elevated my nutrients. I'm looking at some of my LPS corals and the colors that they have, and I'm zooming my camera in, and I'm grabbing my magnifier glass, holding it up to the side of the tank, and just looking really closely at each coral and observing each coral like I've never seen it before, almost like I'm inspecting it for health. Like if there's a single parasite or bug on it, it's going to be a big serious thing or something. Like that's how in depth and in detail I'm searching each coral out for. But what I'm really looking at is the color and the polyps, the extension of the polyps, the color of the polyps, the structure of the coral, if there's new growth, how healthy the new growth is, how fast it's growing, how it's responding to the area of the tank that it's in. And each day I do this over and 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 over again. And I keep looking more and more each day at each coral, and I'm just amazed still today, several years later. I'm still amazed at the possibility of taking something from the ocean, bringing it into my home and putting it into an aquarium that's self-sustaining, and being able to have it grow and survive, and not just survive but flourish in my living room. I'm just blown away by it. Why would I want to have a saltwater reef tank in my living room? Why would you want to have a saltwater reef tank in your living room? Well, if you're like me at all, and you appreciate something that's not normally seen on this earth, and it's not normal for a part of the ocean to be in your living room and to thrive, if you're a person who's passionate about that and cares a lot about that, a saltwater reef tank is for you. So I'm not going to go too long with this video today, guys, but as I'm talking here and you guys have an opportunity to look at some of the different corals in my tank, and you can see some of the corals are just looking amazing and great. Others are kind of struggling a little bit. It looks like some of the flesh is crawling back or almost falling off on some of them. And that's one of the struggles that I've dealt with from the day I've got into the hobby. And it's one of the biggest issues I have with only one tank and limited space in the tank. Now, if I took away half the corals that I have, it would probably be a lot more doable. But because I have like a compulsive addiction to buying corals and spending tons of money buying corals, which I know my wife's listening in the other room right now, but I am making a lot of money back now, selling them, sharing them, trading them with others, and it's turned into a business. My dad and I are growing and expanding the business. But where was I? Think. I got distracted again. Oh yeah. So, why some of the corals are doing so well and some of them look like they're struggling? It's because every reef tank is different. And not every coral can thrive in all the same conditions as every other coral. So that's why you see in the tank, I have a rock structure that gradually starts out here and gets taller towards the back of the tank. And there's certain corals that like higher light, like Acropora is a prime example. Montipora, like a little bit higher lights. They're both in the SPS family. Generally speaking, they're hobbyist terms. SPS is for small polyp stony corals. LPS is for large polyp stony corals. ACAN is an LPS. They have those big, fluffy, bouncy heads on them. And as long as it's healthy, it's out bouncing and fluffing around. SPS corals have those tiny little polyps that stick out and they wave around. If there's a bunch of them on there, it almost looks like a carpet blowing in the wind a little bit, or like some colorful grass or something. But the reason why some of the corals are struggling is because in my light, or in my tank, now I just gave it away, is the lighting. I have so much light over this tank. It's incredibly bright for every coral in here. Even though I've tilted some of the lights back towards the back of the tank. Actually, every light is tilted towards the back of the tank, except the T5s, which are hanging directly above. But some of the corals just can't handle that much light. So I've had to move them to different places and find out which ones can tolerate that little bit extra light even at the very bottom of the tank on the sand bed, and which ones just need to be completely shaded out in my tank, because a lot of light will actually reflect off of the glass and back into the tank underneath rocks and other corals as well. So even if it's in a shaded spot, it might still be getting 50 to 75 par in that area. And par is the measure of light. I'm not going to get too much into the technical details of it, but when we put a par meter in the tank and we measure the light in a certain area, it'll read a number somewhere between 0 and 750 for the most part. Obviously, you can go way higher. You can't go below 0. 0 is just dark. Most coral, I'll break it down a little bit further. Most LPS coral actually thrive between 50 and 115 to 125 par. There's a lot of LPS coral that can still do all right in 125 to 175 par. Most SPS coral does good in 150 to 350 is a good range for SPS coral. Now I know there's bigger places that will put coral, when I say bigger places I mean like retail stores like Top Shelf Aquatics or Worldwide Corals, which will bump their par all the way up to 500, 600 par. Now in those situations, they've acclimated those corals to that amount of light over a longer period of time. So it's not like they're just throwing a coral in the tank and boom, 500 par. No, it's over the course of a long period of time of acclimating to that light. And they also are very heavy nutrient-based systems. Very heavy in, very heavy out. There's a constant, abundant supply of food and nutrients for those coral in those situations. So having a home reef aquarium has a lot of complexity to it. So I'm just going to end tonight's video with that, is every tank is different. Some corals might be doing really great in your tank. Some corals might be struggling. The first thing that I would check is lighting, and the second thing that I would check is your nutrients. Calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, nitrates, phosphates. I mean, these are things that we really need to keep an eye on. Your salinity level, your temperature, your pH, all these things come into factor and have an appropriate balance for each aquarium. One aquarium might have 8.0 alkalinity and another aquarium like mine might have 9.2 alkalinity, and both are growing coral quickly and coral are looking great. And that's okay. It's okay to have different numbers. But when you find the numbers that are working for your tank, when you find the lighting, when you find the flow, when you find the nutrients, when you find your salinity levels, your pH and your temperature that's working for your tank, best to dial it in and hone in on those numbers and keep it there as long as possible. So guys, I appreciate you watching another video tonight. If you have as much fun with your reef tank or even watching these videos as I have with my reef tank and making them, would you consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up? You can always give a thumbs down. It's your life. Do what you want. But if you do give a thumbs down, please let me know why. And if you have any video ideas or suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what's worked for you. Please share it, and I'll get back to you if I'm able. The larger the channel gets, it's just hard to be able to respond to everyone, but I'm able to do it right now. I read every comment of every video that I've made for the last 5 or 6 months, and I do my best to respond to the comments where people are asking for something or just showing some sincere, genuine heart. So I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Aquatic Bobs out!